Now let's turn the page to our physical media review. And it's physical media review. It's not really going to be what you typically think of as a physical media review. I'll explain. But I have here the Fright Night Steelbook, that wonderful picture of Vampire Amy on the front. It emulates the great movie poster that they had. You got the light on inside with Dandridge in there. On the back, we have Vampire Dandridge, portrayed by the great Chris Sarandon. A nice steelbook, as you would expect. I've got the Blu-ray, the 4K DVD, and then a special DVD for the special features for Blu-ray, I believe is how that breaks down there. Now, I've said before, I'm not a 4K person. I don't even own a 4K player or a 4K television. I'm not even somebody who needs / sometimes likes Blu-rays. I think it's a mistake. I've said it before, and I think it's a mistake to always need every film in the highest possible 4K translated quality. I know, obviously, 4K connoisseurs always tell me that, a good 4K translation is really giving you all of the information that was in the film that the film was unable to portray. Fine. But, and Fright Night's a great example of this. When Tom Holland, the director, not the actor, Tom Holland, the great horror film director, who directed Fright Night, Psycho 2, Chucky, Child's Play, and all of that, he shot that film, wrote it, and the cinematographers worked with him. The special effects makeup people worked with it to be portrayed in the technology that they knew was there at that time. When you went to the theater to see Fright Night, or even when you put the VHS in your VCR back in the day, that was the way that the filmmakers and the storytellers expected you to see that film and to experience that film. There's a great moment in one of the special features on this Fright Night. It's a documentary that was done about the making of Fright Night and whatnot, interviewing everybody a while ago. And one of the special effects makeup guys talking about when they had Amy in the, just like shark mouth, vampire mode. And he was talking about what little bit of time they had to kind of, craft it or whatnot. And he kind of jokes aside. He says, don't watch that one. If you're watching that one in a high quality, 4K or whatever, don't pause it on that scene because, he didn't have so much time to put in all the little details. And, he's being a little bit exaggerating, I think, or maybe just being a little too his own worst critic, because the makeup looks great and the effects look wonderful. I think even, I didn't pause it to look for any problems in the makeup, but I don't think I'd have been able to find them. But it did bring a good point. I first saw Fright Night on television on a CRTV back in the day. I don't think it was USA. No. I remember seeing the woman's breasts when Dandridge just got her in the neighbor window there. So it couldn't have been USA. It must have been Showtime or HBO or something like that. But as a teenager, a young teen or whatever, so at 85, I was 5 years old. I wasn't watching Fright Night. But, saw it much later on television. And then I think I did own a VHS or a DVD at some point. And it's a very different experience. Like, that film is made to be seen sort of grainy. Not grainy in terms of bad quality, but the quality that existed in the day. It's just slightly off-putting watching the Blu-ray version of this. It's good, and I'm glad I've got it, for longevity's sake and whatnot. But I'm still going to try to go out and pick up just a DVD copy of the original Fright Night without all of the crystal clarity and all of that, because that's the way I want to experience that story. That's the way I want to see those special effects. To some degree, special effects from 85 are going to feel dated no matter what format you watch them in. But I think that the format they're shot in does them the best justice at the time. Same thing, I would never say go watch, what's the movie that just came out? I haven't seen the new Godzilla Kong movie, but I would never say go get that on straight DVD and make sure you never get that on Blu-ray or something. That's shot in today's effects. That's shot in today's, technology. Of course, I would imagine the director and the filmmakers want you to see that in the most pristine quality that there is, and that's great, But for these older films, I think it's important to realize that highest quality definition isn't always going to serve the story in the best way possible. That's the best way of putting that, I think, because some people are just just nerds about the high quality. No, it's got to be for me, and that's fine. If that's for you, that's fine. But I think it's the best way of saying it is that the highest definition, depending on the film, depending on when it was made, the highest definition doesn't always serve the story. And I'm going to stick with that. Now, talking about Fright Night in general, I'll try not to, because I could go on hours talking about like a really in-depth analysis of the film. So I just want to say a few words about it. Tom Holland, the director, the writer, director, creator, he said that this was sort of his love letter to the classic monster movies that he enjoyed growing up. And at the time he made this film in 1985, vampires were a joke. He said that the last vampire movie he knew of was the George Hamilton Once Bitten or something like, I forget, I maybe got the name wrong of that, but it was sort of a parody, a parody of the genre. And it had been around for quite a while, in terms of vampire horror movies, so you've had Bela Lugosi, or Nosferatu before that even. And that Bela Lugosi one really stuck in culture as the image of Dracula. Even with the Great Hammer Horror and Christopher Lee Draculas, they were still doing their own thing, but taking their heavy cues from Bela Lugosi. I grew up going to get Halloween decorations, and the vampires were Bela Lugosi. The Frankensteins were Boris Karloff, and so forth. The Wolfmen were Lon Chaney's, or at least some element of that. Now it's just so blown past that. We've lost touch with so many of our cultural strands from the past. And, so the day when he was making Fright Night, no one was really respecting that kind of vampire story. So Fright Night was a wonderful way for him to take the traditional vampire type movie story and update it a little bit into what if, Dracula, quote unquote, not Dracula, but, Dandridge, what if Dracula moved in next door to you in a suburban home? That's the idea. And it updated it, and it was great. And we have the character, Roddy McDowall's character, Peter Vincent, named for Peter Cushing and Vincent Price, as an old horror film actor. It's imagined like Peter Cushing, coming to help this kid, or whatever, but he's now a horror host at the time. And so it meant something when the movie came out. It was trying to pay homage to and point out the importance. I think even if Tom Holland wouldn't have thought about this at the time, I think culturally what it did was point out the importance of those stories. It's important that we take the role of like monsters in our fictions, like Dracula or a vampire. You have to take them seriously in the context of good versus evil. That's key. And that's really what it meant when he brought the movie out. And I'll go into some more specifics there in a moment. Now, when I was watching the film for the first time as a young teen, I had, this was the Interview with the Vampire era. The movie had come out somewhat recently. There were a lot of other vampire movies happening that were really trying to push the idea of the vampire past this traditional monster that you can defeat with a crucifix or holy water, that kind of stuff. They were really pushing past that into sometimes some films and some books. I mean, even Anne Rice's books. I loved that movie when it came out, and I read some of the books, and that first book in particular was a very wonderful book. It was using the idea of being a vampire as an exploration of, how to be human, or dealing with the monsters inside of us. And that's interesting, and it has its place. But I think it's an incredibly bad mistake to replace the classic good versus evil vampire stories with these new or new at the time versions of the character and the vampires and whatnot. So going back to 1985's Fright Night, for me as a young teenager in the 90s, was just as important as it was for Tom Holland to make the film and kind of bring back or update the classic vampire story. And there are so many touches of that in the movie. Again, I'm going to stop myself from going too deep into it. But there are so many touches of that, like when Charlie goes to visit Peter Vincent for the first time to ask for his help, and Peter Vincent has just been fired from his horror hosting show, and he says something to the effect of, they don't believe in the good classics, tradition anymore. They just want their axe-wielding, mask-wearing slashers or whatever. And that's a loaded comment because, Tom Holland went on to direct Chucky, so he's not like anti-slasher movies, but it is an important differentiation. Like I always say, I'm not a horror fan, I'm a monster movie fan. I'm not really big into the Friday the 13th or the Nightmare on Elm Street movies for the most part. I like the original Halloween, and that's it. I really like good versus evil monster movies. And that distinction isn't always made. Some people are like, well, how can you not like, well, you say you like that, of course you like horror. Well, no, it's different. It's slightly different. And I think it's important that we hold on to traditional stories that acknowledge that good can defeat evil. It's great to have a story with a dragon. Wonderful. Make it as terrifying dragon. Make it a really creepy, horrifying story about the dragon. But if the story doesn't acknowledge that good can overcome the dragon, even if it doesn't at some places in the movie, or the character, even if it was a movie in which the hero failed and evil won in the end or something. I'm not crazy about that type of thing. But even that kind of thing can be valid if it acknowledges that good can triumph. I never saw the point in these super nihilistic movies. I mean, I understand the appeal. I understand it's a catharsis when it boils down to it. The hardcore slasher movie, even in a nihilistic way, the catharsis is what people go to them for. But I think we need to keep catharsis in check. It's my own personal viewpoint. And I think for our stories, we need to make sure that our stories encourage the good. There's something to be said for catharsis, great, but we need to encourage the good. So the movie's great for that. Charlie Brewster himself, the main character, Tom Holland had said that he wanted to imagine, like, what if he himself, as a monster movie fan, Tom Holland, realized there was a vampire living next door to him or whatever. And Brewster is a horror movie fan, but he's got his friend Evil Ed, who's really the horror movie connoisseur. There's a key thing in the movie. Now, this was different in the novelization, so I imagine it might have been different in the original script, because novelizations are usually written based on the scripts. But when Charlie realizes it is a vampire, he has to go to his friend Evil Ed to ask him, how do I kill a vampire? Now, you would think a huge super connoisseur of horror films, watching every bit of them and geeking out over every element, would know that. But he has to go to his friend. And I think in the movie anyway, the way the character's portrayed, this speaks to what's missing in his character and what he has to come to grow to develop to in the end, is that he's not very focused. We first see Charlie Brewster. He's making out with his girlfriend, Amy. He's focused on getting what he wants from her, right, to get her bra off or whatever. She's saying no. He's not paying attention. Peter Vincent is on TV. The Fright Night show is on TV, which she says, hey, do you like this guy? And he's like, yeah, but he's not focused on it. And he's got the posters up in his room, but he's not really dedicated to a purpose yet. That's Charlie Brewster when we meet him in the beginning of the film. And I think the fact that he's into horror movies but still doesn't really know for sure exactly how to kill a vampire is a testament to that. No matter what it was originally conceived of, or what some of the actors might say, this is the character that we received in the movie, and that's the way he was shown. Now, once he realizes that the vampire's next door, and not just that there's a vampire next door, but he realizes that he met one of the victims. These are young women. He meets one of them, and they're dying. He's dedicated. He's dedicated to stopping this murderer next door. And that's a very admirable thing. Even everyone thinks he's crazy at first. He gets into so much trouble with the vampire himself and everybody, but he's dedicated. You have this very aspirational motive within him. He wants to stop this murderer, even though it's a great cost to himself to try to do this. That's great that you can really empathize and engage and invest in the character in that way. And by the end of it, you have a character who's grown so much from the unfocused, didn't really know what he wanted to do, wasn't dedicated to any certain thing. You have a really focused, accomplished individual. He's made relationships. His relationship with his girlfriend stronger. He's made the great friendship with mentor Peter Vincent. He's accomplished. He's gotten rid of the evil. It's just a wonderful movie. It's a great good versus evil story, and it's funny in places. It's terrifying in some places. It's as good monster movies should be. So really do recommend checking out Fright Night. Again, I would say if you're just going to buy one, get a DVD copy, but the Blu-ray Steelbook is a nice little package anyway. Now, I purposefully didn't mention Tom Holland's the comics or anything like that. There is a sequel that was not done with Tom Holland's participation, which I think came out in 1989, which is still pretty good. They only released it in a formatted to fit your screen version on DVD back in the day, which is still all you can get it DVD wise, which is a shame. They need to release it on letterboxed, or widescreen or whatever, But comic books did come out, and Tom Holland himself wrote a novelization which he calls Fright Night Origins, which is his real vision of the character and how it happened, novelized movie-wise, and it goes a little bit beyond that. And he himself is given his blessing to certain comics. So the story does continue not in the movie sequel version, but in Tom Holland's original vision, the story does continue. And I'll actually be talking about that at some point in future episodes, because I did recently purchase a nice hardback edition of the comic books that Tom Holland has given his blessing to. So we'll be talking about some more of the extended story. Of course, they did the remakes. I bought them. I haven't watched them yet. I really wasn't interested in the Fright Night remake they did in like 2011-ish or whatever over here, and that's the sequel. I'll watch them eventually just to sate my curiosity about, the continuation of the story and how it's affected culture. I can't imagine they'll even remotely be. They won't touch the original classic. I know that. But, when I get into something, I want to really, the academic in me wants to study all the strains and, get all the information together to process it. So there's that. But yeah, that's a physical media review, sort of. We'll keep doing some of those, whether it's music or movies or books on each of these episodes.